But yes, Ask Robin Black. I'll take a couple of questions for Ask Robin Black, and then we will take just a few minutes to tease up very early thoughts on TJ versus Henry. If you're just joining us for this segment, we talked about it in, actually, no, I was going to say, Woolman7242 said, all outside stuff aside, how good is John Jones? Well, if you're just joining us now, go back and watch the UFC 232 or listen to the UFC 232 recap, and you'll hear how good John Jones is. Buckley I.O. Psych, at Buckley, capital I, capital O, Psych. What title, who I met down in, where were we last? Where was... Shit, I don't remember. New York?
For the live
Where
show?
was I on the road for, I think it was, I don't know, maybe it was New York. But good dude. He, really nice guy. Made a point to come down and say hello. What title fight that you witnessed in person stands out as the most memorable to you? That's a nice end of the year one, but ever is a cool one. I'll tell this story quickly because I've told it before, but fight-wise, the moments of seeing people overcome and the moments of some brilliant series of choices and series of sort of expressions of what somebody can do to overcome somebody else. It is the reason that fighting is so incredible. But from a title as a title fight, often it is the feelings of victory that are so neat that go with it. For me, I don't really care about these belts that much. And I care even less now that there's, 2 or 3 per division and people having 2 and 3 is not uncommon. It's like, why would it matter to be a 2-division champion? Well, it's, because one's not enough, right? Yeah. And then once you're now at a point where there's 2, 3, Dan, Amanda, Connor, it's even having 2 is really not going to be all that.
Honestly, it just it means something now if you were to defend both belts.
Yeah.
Not just claim them, defend both belts.
A fight.
Be a dominant champion in both.
Beat the best person.
That would
in both.
be amazing.
Yeah. And that'll happen. Once it's where one-upmanship is a part of, when everyone has to be the GOAT and everything has to be the biggest and everything's the best ever, you have to keep one-upping. That's the nature of the issue. If we are selling and celebrating mostly outcomes, the outcomes have to become bigger all the time, which is part of the root of why I enjoy these things so much. Is I'm not so attached to the outcomes. They don't matter. I don't really care who's the greatest ever, and it doesn't really, and I'm not disliking it. It's just I don't connect deeply to that. I connect to these moments, the little human elements of the stories inside those moments and the history of their life to create the ability to have those moments. That's what I'm attached to. But in title fights, there's that and people achieving a dream. And today, when somebody's got that belt and they win, and it's an incredible thing. Even if Michael Chiesa were to become the welterweight champion at the end of 2019, it'll still be achieving a lifelong dream. But he in his life has seen 60 or 80 people achieve that dream. It won't minimize it to him. Well, then maybe it even will, because he doesn't know what it'd be like to be the only one in the world who had it. But it will to us. We will look at it and be like, good for him. As a fan, we're thrilled for him. But it just doesn't have as much as it did. But
special.
It won't be as special. Yeah, years ago, you would see the insane, like, barely human joy that people had, and when Shogun beat Lyoto. Which was Toronto or Montreal?
That was Montreal.
It might have been Montreal. I was there regardless. And I came back, and, it's a big boom, and they had 25 minutes of really close, and he thought he won the first time. And, the judges, maybe the first one was in Montreal.
No, Shogun won in Montreal.
Yeah, Shogun won in Montreal. It's hard. Forgive me. It's a great, beautiful thing to say, but sometimes you'll travel so many times you forget which city it was in. But after the first time, 25 minutes, and, a lot of people believe Shogun had won, but wherever the first one was, the judges didn't maybe connect to leg kicks. Mm-hmm. So even in rounds where most people who have fought or knew fighting on a deeper level would be like, wow, that was a fucking Shogun round. What a heavy round. Man, did he destroy that guy's leg? And newer boxing judges would be like, he didn't land very many punches and wouldn't really connect to it. Anyways, irrelevant. Lyoto won that one, and congrats to him. Comes back, and he knocks Lyoto out. And the celebration was insane. And then in the 10 minutes after, he does an interview, other things happen. I shoot something from my job, whatever's going on. And I go into the back, and there's Shogun, and he's crying. He's like bawling. And he's wearing no shirt still, just his fight shorts. And he's carrying it over his head, and he's dancing, and he's singing, right? And he's fucking singing some crazy Brazilian celebration song with like 3 or 4 of his guys on either side, and you recognize these people. Some were his training partners. There's a translator that was always around. I think Murillo, his brother, was there, and they're dancing. They're doing some crazy like dance, singing, and they'd go by, and you'd be standing there, and like, wow, that's incredible. And as they disappear out of your sight, you hear the singing go a little quieter. Then you go back to whatever you're doing, working, and just because the arena is a circle, and then you hear out of this side, you hear it start coming again, and then he comes, he's still bawling incoherently with tears everywhere, doing some weird high-kicking capoeira fucking dance, bawling their brains out, and you were looking at it and going, now that I can feel, right? That I can feel. You know, like, that guy had been everywhere, and he'd been a champion everywhere. And I think Forrest ended up taking it. No. Who beat Shogun? Was it Rampage? Who ended up beating Shogun? Didn't matter. In that moment, he had achieved a lifelong dream to add to his other accomplishments from all over the world and dedicating his life to it. And it was incredible. The other one for me, the more recent, that's years and years ago. The more recent one, when George beat Mike. And I like them both very much. I was traveling with George doing a documentary, and Mike is a friend, and I admire him greatly. Seeing that one kind of go down like that, and witnessing the fight and the high level that it was, and the complicated, in many complex things happening in that fight, and yet also many simple broad strokes things. And although George was a close friend, or is a close friend, and I had been traveling with him for months doing a documentary, I went to Mike's after party, and not a choice. I don't think I was invited to George's, or I probably didn't have one, or if he did, I wasn't invited. And I know he actually did go to the hospital. Remember, he had a thing in his stomach, so I don't even think he went out.
Yeah, no, he had to go to the hospital for the cuts, but that's the whole thing.
Yeah, that's when they also found he. Oh yeah, that's right. I talked to him the next day.
Came out with it after,
and he didn't.
He didn't disclose it.
He didn't go out that night.
Yeah.
I forget the polite French Canadian way he said I was shitting blood. I don't know what the right way to say that is as a incredibly polite Canadian. And then Mike was down, but he was already. I was cool. He was already really able to, appreciate everything he had done, which was really cool. Man, so many. But thank you for asking.
TJ's win that night too. He was like, that was a really good big moment.
Yeah, that was.
He was like
that,
the second.
And then Rose beat.
Rose beat.
Yeah, that was a fucking hell of a show. New York City, New York.
Home.
Go home and watch that one too. That was pretty incredible.
A really good card.
Yeah, Rose beating Joanna, and then TJ, and a crazy night too. Like from even a working standpoint, from a fan standpoint, Rose, performed amazingly. TJ versus Cody was an amazing fight, and then George and Mike, just such a tension-filled fight, and such a lot of huge swings in the way that fight was going. But then even after, like, you're done, your fan part is done, but then you're still doing your job. Cody started crying while I was talking to him, just because this is how much this means, especially the younger fighter. You're young, And then George has been taken out in an ambulance, and
that was his first pro loss too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But to
lose to your first pro loss to the guy you absolutely hate.
You hate, yeah. But he handled it well. Cody's a smart guy. He's gonna. There's still a lot. There's barely any of his story has been written yet. There's so much more, and so much more to be written. But Buckley, Psych, thanks for that, man. That's a nice year ender. While he's at it, he goes, "Can you recommend 2 to 3 books worth checking out?" Well, I can't recommend them yet, but I actually have. My father-in-law gave me this, and I'm quite interested in it. And I'm going to read it, and I'll talk about it maybe in the next show a little bit, if it carries off into something I'm looking at, some concepts. Sometimes these books, how you'll read it would be very different than how you would have read it 5 years ago or 5 years from now, because it'll take into account what you know and questions you've developed based on other things you've been exposed to. Thinking on top of thinking and learning on top of whatever, your bed of knowledge on a subject. But even if you don't have, aren't looking at martial arts from this standpoint, which is the standpoint I'm intending to look at this, it's called Meditations on Violence. And by Sergeant Rory Miller, a comparison of martial arts training and real-world violence. And so, as I've been glancing at and reading it, there's a lot of if we go hard one way, what does Rogan put up? The fake. What is hashtag?
Fake news?
No, it's like martial arts that don't work.
Oh,
shit. Whatever it is.
Bullshito.
Yeah, Joe pulls out these, like, I don't know where he finds them, but I mean, I do know where he finds them because, among other things, people probably send him like, Joe, you got to see this. Because even my 1 minute breakdowns, I get a dozen a day now from people. It's hard to even go through, so he must get 1,000 like in a week. But he finds them, and then he'll say, like, look at this, and it's just, nonsensical stuff. And the funny ones are when guys actually get hit. There was one in a fight, and the guy kind of was going in with some sort of theoretical.
Was the old Chinese guy?
No, I've seen that one though.
That one was brutal.
Yeah, where the guy's like beating him up, where he's trying to do some kind of. Yeah, I don't know. You don't got to beat up a 65-year-old guy. Like, just let him, be caught up in his delusion that this martial art that he's dedicated his life to.
He should just back off. Like, you should let common sense kick in. Like, no, I'm not. Like, I don't want to do this. Yeah,
but so there was a guy, like, he comes into like a ring of a kickboxing fight, and he's got his hands down and he's ready to go, and the guy's just like, oh, this is what, boom, and just like, so that's on one side, and on the other side is, real world experience from a martial artist in his prison environment, but he studied war and fighting and stuff like that. And the reason for me this is not of course I'm interested in how combat happens in the real world, because I've studied combat in all its forms, and it's my deepest curiosity and my passion and my job. But I'm looking at this from the area in between, sport combat and the experiment that is mixed martial arts and other forms of free fighting is a slightly controlled world, but the realities of violence are a part of it. Fear and anxiety and being injured and the desire to all of the truths of it. And so it is somewhere between, really, whether we're talking about the UFC or Ryzen or wherever you want to go, it's lying somewhere in between somebody trying to kill your family to steal your food in another, in a war-torn world, and somebody training in a gym with a weird ancient gi outfit that, somewhere in there is where what we enjoy and study and analyze lies. And so I'll read this from the point of view of that wide comparison, but I will take my decades of looking at this part and I'll blend that into it. So I'm really interested in that. And then there's a book I always like to recommend. I'm going to go back and read it because, again, I'll read it differently. It's called The One Thing, and David Mullins gave it to me. I have one around the house, but I don't know where it is, but O-N-E, The One Thing. And it basically looks at the truth concept that you really can only do one thing at a time. When you're multitasking, you're doing one thing, then one thing, then one thing, then one thing. You're not doing two things. And your brain, and so a third book I'll mention is called Deep Work. One Thing and Deep Work will connect. They're very different books, but those ideas will connect. And if you wanted to become, let's say, a UFC commentator, let's say that was your goal, that is a very difficult goal. But if you can break it down into many steps of things, well, to be a UFC commentator, I would have to get hired to commentate. I would have to become a very good commentator. To do that, I would do many, hundreds of doing it well. And to do that, I got to do it the first time. And to do that, I probably got to fight. And to do that, I've got to train. And to do that, I've got to get fit. And you work it all the way down. And truthfully, when I started, my 10-year plan to commentate the UFC. I started down here, and it didn't matter. I didn't know who I'd never met Dana White. I'd never met any of those guys. I had no connection to it, but it didn't matter if I started with get in the gym and train and get in shape. That was my first thing. And after you got enough, it was like, get better at jiu-jitsu, and then do some jiu-jitsu tournaments, and then improve your skill, and then, do some kind of shoot fighting tournament where there's some striking and some, or wushu or sanda or whatever. And then from there do that, and then have a pro fight, and then have another pro fight, and then win, and then meet somebody, and then get a job, and then, I can't get a job and I couldn't. In mixed martial arts or commentary or any of it. I couldn't. So it was do that job for free. And then even that was difficult. So you keep working your way back, and you find one thing, and you do one thing, and one thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing. And now I'm 27 steps along the way. And you also know that the target may change. Be a UFC commentator may phase off into, work for one championship or wherever. The one thing may change, but you can only do one. And a lot of the time, a lot of us, and this is not judgment, we do it, we see it, we do it ourselves, our friends do it. People are like, I want to start a business. Well, to start a business, you know what the first thing is? Start a business. Like people, and you'll have this conversation. Very normal. It's a function of an overwhelming option world that we live in. It's like, well, what kind of business should I start? Well, fuck it, just start one, and then that one will transition to the next one, and that'll turn into another thing. And well, first I want to set up all my shit. It's like, no, first start it, then set up a podcast. Start that. And once the podcast is started, make a Facebook page. And once the Facebook page is made, and tomorrow you'll do one thing. Go back and do another podcast. And then you listen to it and realize something's fucked. And then you'll go and fix that thing. It's just one thing. It's always one thing. Anyways, that's a really great book. David Mullins, shout out to David Mullins. He recommended it to me. I'm going to read it again. It's very useful. There's no arguing that you can only do one thing at a time. You really can't. And then deep work actually does look at some of that. The action of what happens when you are checking your email and then you're also on Instagram. You are not doing them both at a time. Your brain needs to engage, check your email, disengage, re-engage on Instagram, do the Instagram, disengage, re-engage. If you do both of those things for 20 minutes, but instead you did one for 6 and the other for 6, you would accomplish more. You'd have only spent 12 minutes. You'd have 8 more minutes to do some other thing, some other one thing. Anyways, go read them. It made a big difference for me, and I'm still no master. My fucking scheduling skills have all deteriorated over the last few months because things change, and I got out of the habit of all you can do is, and also while we're at it, New Year's resolutions, just fucking nonsense. Don't even bother. Just find one thing. Just find one thing and stay and do that thing. Do that thing for a while, and by all means, don't make 6 New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose weight, and I'm going to work out every day, and I'm going to fucking go back to swimming lessons, and I'm going to cook dinner every day. It's like fucking, you can only do one thing. Just do one. Anyways, sorry to go off on some of those things, but they're valuable for me too, because even saying them out loud, I know some of this stuff. I did read those books, and it's very normal. You check in, you're like, fuck, I'm not doing one thing at a time. I'm doing 3 things, which means I'm doing nothing well. And I'm not scheduling with one thing, then one thing, and one thing. In fact, I haven't been scheduling at all. So these are good reminders. And it's normal to do that. Spot yourself making a mistake and then work your way back, and you'll be fine. Because we're all just human. A kind question here. I touch on it for a second. It's not something I'm talking about a great deal anymore because it drives me crazy. And it shouldn't because it's out of my control. But at Satanovic_Mickey. Ask Robin Black, how is it possible you don't sit next to Joe Rogan and work for the UFC? You're clearly one of the greats at what you do. Is it because of Dana White? No, it isn't. It's because large organizations are very complicated. They're very, very complicated. If you catch... the last time I caught Dana alone for a minute, I asked him one question on a red carpet. He said, wow, man, like, well put. And then a day later, he watched one of my things right here on our YouTube channel. And 2 days later, I was in New York doing a thing for ESPN. Because I fucking in his world of 700,000 things, he was reminded, oh, yeah, that guy's pretty good. And I did a thing. And then that was, 18 months ago, and he forgot. That's the reality. So again, like those books, the only thing you can do is... Not the only thing. You can do whatever the fuck you want. You can get all caught up and obsessed, and I have, trust me. But what you cannot control, what someone's doing, what an organization's doing, how a hierarchy works, who a guy hired, somebody's best friend is something that's really good, or there's fucking a million variables. What you can control is you get better every day, you grow your own shit, you get to the point that you don't need any of these people. You don't need any of these large companies. You don't need to work for Nike, or you don't need to work for, Starbucks or whatever. You grow your own thing so much so that if and when you work for someone, it's out of a desire to be part of something bigger than yourself that makes you happy. That's not easy. But you go back and you figure out the one thing at a time you do, and you can do it. Everybody fucking that you consume that's big. The Rock started off as not The Rock. He wasn't born The Rock. He just started off as some guy.
Before he was even wrestling, he was in the CFL.
Yeah. You know what the CFL... I don't know if people know what the CFL is. Yeah, I don't know if people know what the CFL is, but the CFL is the Canadian Football League. And literally, I think... Back then, people were making less than a kindergarten school teacher.
Really, really bad.
Yeah, and getting smashed up. Now he's the biggest fucking star in the world. We are not, all of us are not going to do that, but it's the same exact thing, a little bit every day. I'm off on this line of thinking today, which I feel fortunate to be asked these questions, because this is a good little direction pointer for me too. We all need it. And with New Year's coming, it ain't about making 27 improvements. It's about making 1 or 2 tiny improvements. I've been, if you're not eating well, you've been eating shitty, eat a little better, tiny bit. You're not going to fucking eat only salads and perfect meat every day. At least make it a little tiny bit better. You haven't been going to the gym as much? You got that little bit of pudge from Christmas? Go to the gym tomorrow.
Just do what Vitor did. Just add one thing. Add that spinning wheel kick.
Yeah.
Just add one thing.
Hey, Luke Rockhold started taking away one thing. That's important too, is knowing what not to do. He did fucking look at Luke Rockhold when he was fighting Jacare. If I could watch him, it's like, holy fuck, that guy like throws everything. And then for a while, when he was like beating everybody, he was throwing a left body kick and a right hook from southpaw, and playing with. He minimized the menu to such a point, and you can do that too. It's like, well, should I watch Netflix for 2 hours a day and I play video games for 1 hour a day? Well, shit, that's a whole bunch of kicks you can get rid of. Not that you should. If it's important to you, do it. But it's what you get rid of, too, that's kind of lets you focus.
That should be one person's New Year's resolution. Cancel one of your subscription services.
Yeah,
one
no
of your
kidding.
Monthly streaming, Spotify, Netflix,
How the fuck are we subscribed to so many things now? Yeah, cancel one thing a month.
And back then, when we used to call like Rogers Cable and all that, no, you gave me too many options, too many channels.
Yeah. Also, the best thing, by the end of January, I will cancel 90% of my television. How I still have a large amount of television.
Just need it for live sports.
Yeah.
That's all we need for live sports and award shows.
Yeah. Yep. And there's the odd thing, like we like Cops. I don't know why, man. Cops is a great show. It's one of the greatest shows ever.
Buy the DVD spot sets for Cops
now. You can get it on demand. And then Erica likes some cooking shows, and there's a few things. Like there's a couple of things. A couple of things. Okay, so a couple last things quickly. Do you, at KS Tyana, Tyna, Tyna, do you think the knee kicks should be banned? No. I think less things should be banned. I think more things should be included. I know that it's dangerous, but getting kicked in the head with a shin is dangerous too. Over time, by allowing things, you find answers to them and they become less dangerous. And it's true. Man, if everybody was if you could get kicked, the head kick to a downed opponent, that's more real. That could happen if you're defending your mother from getting attacked or somebody from stealing from, if something was happening in real life, they can kick you. Trust me, if MMA allowed kicks to the heads of a downed opponent, there'd be a few of those, and it would be really unsightly and really uncomfortable for about 5 or 6 months, and then you'd never see him again.
So the reason why one no longer does is because of Brandon Vera's knockout or Roger Huerta's
knockout. It's the reason one doesn't do it is and they used to. You can go back. They did it because it's more real. It's the reality. There's a beautiful reality in martial arts when you include more things. But it's difficult for an audience to digest. If they don't understand that these are people who love this chance to get in here for this reason, and all they see is that it's very difficult for people. And as a result, yes, from a standpoint of course, I want more people to experience martial arts. Yeah, sure, you can ban some things. But from me as a purist, I want you to be able to do everything. Over time, it would never happen anymore. The more dangerous something is, the more you would learn to make sure it never happens. It would be prioritized in training. If headbutts were legal, man, the guard would be a different game. Right?
And they'd be used to a certain extent of efficiency. Like, if you look at the Vale Tudo fights in Brazil back in the day, even though the eye gouges and the headbutts and the groin shots were legal, they weren't used all the time throughout like they were used at certain points in the fight for certain reasons.
It's true. But this won't happen. And purist versus love of more people seeing it, that's why, that's why even a purist, you can't have people biting each other's nose off. Although when I chatted with Rogan on one of his podcasts, we were talking about that. And his answer in his wild thinking mind was like, well, genetically you can grow those things back now. And I was like, well, if you can grow them, that's a whole other conversation, because if you can grow them back, then it's not as risky, right? It's like, oh my God, if I could lose my nose and it's gone forever, that's a lot different than I could lose my nose and in a week and a half I could get it back and go, bummer, that sucked, But hey, these conversations can go on forever. Last question at Telvin Kipapa is Dwayne and TJ, the greatest fighter coach combo of all time. And that leads us into our final segment today. Early analysis of TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo. And how long have we been chatting today, Mark? Hour and a half?
About an hour 20.
Hour 20. Well, give me a 10-minute max here. Yeah. Hey, you don't like to have rules and structures and outlines, but sometimes that forces you to, having structure can be a good thing. So where do we start? TJ and Henry Cejudo,
which will be at 125.
Yeah, so it is the flyweight championship of the world. So TJ would be the fourth champ if he were able to do it. Yeah. Connor, 2 divisions at a time. Daniel Cormier, 2 divisions at a time. Amanda Nunes, just recently, 2 divisions at a time. TJ. So is that as big an accomplishment as
TJ might have the asterisk next to it because he becomes champ and they shut down the division a week after.
Yeah, if they do.
Which
if they do.
Most likely will.
I don't know if they will. They might, though. Yeah. Who knows? Who the fuck knows? That's a business question. And
yeah, exactly.
And will they shut down that division after? And it's like, should they? And, we talk about this. We often say, is it fair that this guy got this? Or do you think the UFC should have this? Or,
they don't owe it to anyone to keep the division.
It's somebody's business. It's not ours,
business,
right?
Yeah,
it's like
UFC's business.
There was Patreon censored a guy.
Yeah.
And said something he said was outside of the rules. It was just somewhere else in a podcast. And if you don't know it, Patreon is a place where you can pledge money in support of podcasters and people. And we have a Patreon page.
Patreon.com/Robin Black.
Patreon.com/Robin Black. But I've woefully forgotten about it, so I will not ask for your money right now. If we can circle back and turn that into something special, where, and I think we can now. At the time, we didn't know. It was all so new to us to try to find a way to give special content. We didn't know how to shoot things and transfer things. But I will not ask for it, please. And in fact, if you are generously giving money, and I promised you something, you feel free to discontinue, and feel free to reach out somewhere so I can find some other way to thank you for being so generous when we started. But so they're a place where you can give $10 or $5 or $100 in support of your favorite podcaster or any number of things.
Right.
So they said, okay, well, we're banning this guy because of something he said. And a lot of people are angry, and you can, by all means, be angry. But ultimately, this is not like hydro or like a government thing or Medicare or like art in Canada. This is just somebody's business.
Private business.
Yeah, somebody owns this business. It's a weird world we're living in right now where we feel like these things. Facebook, just some people own it. Right, like it's so deeply connected to our life.
People feel like it's public domain.
Yeah, you feel like this is like, the world, but it's just somebody's business. And Patreon, same thing. So what do? You're mad. Facebook's did something. They're doing something with like people's information. Like fucking turn them off and don't do business with them ever again. Patreon, you don't like the way they treated? Well, then fucking shut that page down. There are other ways to do it. Dr. Jordan Peterson and a couple other guys are creating some other place. If that's a way you support your favorite content creators, then you can go there. Same thing with the UFC. If you don't like what they're doing, and people will all the time, we get outraged. And again, I'm talking about TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo. But as you may know, if this is not the first time, the structure is very malleable here. It'll go where it'll go, and it'll still be titled Henry Cejudo versus TJ Dillashaw early analysis. That's just what we do, and it's 2018, and it's our private business, right? But if you don't like what the UFC does, you don't like they shut down that thing, you don't like the way they fucked over people and they moved a thing, you just stop going and you stop buying it. And if you won't, or you can't, or you love it so much, then I'm sorry to tell you this, but you have to accept it. Or you can accept it and be mad, but you're not doing anything to them by being mad. You're doing something to you. You're still doing that thing, but you're outraged. And that outrage, that's on you. And it is, even though they did something that made you mad, they did something that was unfair, or you didn't like that business practice. If you are a consumer, it is your right to be mad, but you're only hurting yourself. Being outraged, angry, frustrated, triggered, I don't know, whatever you want to say. You are not doing anything to them. Now, sometimes if everyone goes on Twitter and triggers each other and freaks out, it feels like you're doing something, but you're really not. So anyways, that's down the road. But so should they get rid of that division? If it were my business, I think these are some of the greatest, they are the greatest athletes. They are should gymnasts have to be 180 pounds and more? No, the best fucking gymnasts are 5'3", 155 pounds or 49. I don't know what they are exactly, but they're small, stocky, because that's where the best gymnasts are. Now, you imagine being in a world where instead of the Olympics, they're like, yeah, but people don't like them as much as when they see 7-foot-tall basketball players doing backflips. Fuck, that would be cool, right? It would be super cool. You imagine like a 7-foot, you imagine John Jones being a gymnast? That'd be way more interesting. But I want to see the best gymnast, not the most interesting gymnast. I want to see the ones who can express the art well. And I know that you don't have to see it that way, and by all means disagree. It's totally cool because you may want to see impact or damage, or there are other things you're interested in, and that's entirely cool. But man, nobody's a better martial artist in the world than Demetrius Johnson, and that isn't coincidentally that he's small. It's what an athlete like that is capable of doing. The shortened nervous system, the way that their body's created, the weight versus power ratio, all those things. That's why he's so good. But anyway, so Mark, 10 minutes. What did we say?
It's okay. We got about 5 minutes.
We got about 5 minutes. So and by all means, you again, you can complain all you want, but this is my podcast, right? I can waste 5 minutes talking about and not say a fucking word about this, and Mark can still title it TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo early analysis. You know why we can do that? Because it's our fucking podcast. It's the UFC's business. This is the world we're living in. We don't get to make it our way. We take our business away, and that's cool. Totally understand if you do, or from the UFC or Patreon or fucking youtube.com/Robin Black, but that's what you can do. Or don't let them get to you, and do not let outrage be triggered that harms you.